Hello everyone and welcome back to Mixing
It's
Continents.
going.
Today I'll take you on a journey through Australia from the small town of Freemantle next to Perth to the Great Murray River in Albury to make a cocktail I call Fingering Myrtle. For those of you new to the channel, this is a series called No Bars in the Wild. Throughout this series I travel across continents hunting for native ingredients and local spirits to use in my drinks. My goal is to explore the world through cocktails and make drinks where no bartender has before, all inspired by the world around me. In future episodes, I'll take you through mountains, up volcanoes, and into caves to gather ingredients.
Oh, Jesus
So
Christ.
subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date with what's been going on. So, the story about Fingering Myrtle begins in Freemantle. This is the beginning of my 9-month journey through Australia and Southeast Asia. On my third day here, we went to a bar crawl through Freemantle, which is where I found my first ingredient. Went to a number of bars and breweries, including Gage Roads, a pretty famous brewery here in Western Australia, as well as Darling, a small pirate-themed speakeasy. But my favourite spot of the day was the Republic Freemantle Gin Distillery. Here we got to do a gin tasting for just $14, where we got to try 4 different gins as well as a few pre-batch spritz and cocktails, so it was well worth the money. The gins were really delicious, but the one that stood out to me the most was their 53% Navy strength. And despite its percentage, it was incredibly smooth and could easily be a great sipping gin. And being pure at heart, it was the perfect choice to make an infusion with whatever I happen to come across, which brings me to my next ingredient, Aniseed Myrtle. Over the next few weeks, I was pretty busy exploring Western Australia, visiting the bush, meeting animals, and celebrating a friend's wedding. So I was fortunate enough to meet lots of amazing people along the way. And it wasn't until I was leaving Perth, one of the girls I met at the wedding gave me a gift. And it was a small pack of dried aniseed myrtle from a local health food store. She said it looked pretty interesting and had no idea what I would do with it, but was sure I could come up with something. So I tasted a little bit in a tea before I left, and it was slightly sweet with hints of licorice and some mild herbaceous notes. My next stop on this journey was Adelaide. I arrived pretty late and I was only here for less than 24 hours, so I had to make the most of it. So I did what any sane person would do and just not sleep. So I decided to take an Uber just outside of the city and hiked up Mount Lofty at 2 AM to catch the sunrise over the city, where I was hoping I might run into an ingredient or two along the way. But the only thing that jumped out at me was a kangaroo. After this, I went back down, also passing my first waterfall in the strip, so I stood here for a hot minute just to take it all in. After this, I hopped back in an Uber and went to the Adelaide Central Market, which is a great spot to grab some breakfast and to hunt around for some fruits to use in this drink. After the market, I explored the city for a while and took a trip down to the beach, but I had to catch an overnight bus to Melbourne later that evening, and to be honest with you, whilst there, I met up with an old friend and I was too busy drinking, eating or being hungover to film anything of importance. But again, went to the markets to try and find some fruits, and in both markets I was in the hunt for something truly native, and I really wanted to find finger limes. But all I could find was your general tropical fruits, yes, Australian grown, but for my first drink I wanted something new. And even went to the botanical gardens in both cities to see if I could find anything there, but unfortunately no luck either. So after leaving Melbourne, I had a gin and some dried bush herbs, but nothing to pair it with. So the next spot I hit was where I happened to make this drink. So I went to go visit some friends in Albury, a small town around 2 to 3 hours north of Melbourne. And we went to their local supermarket. But it was more of a huge health food store, and I mean everything just had the most amazing quality. And I finally found them, finger limes, as well as a bunch of other fruits that were new to me. So I grabbed some jujube fruits, mangosteens, and a cha-cha. We took this back to their house and gave them a try. But the mangosteens and the cha-cha seemed a bit too sweet for this drink, so I chose the jujube to add to the mix, as it had a mild sweet flavour with a slightly tart undertone quite similar to a crisp apple, which I thought would go well in this recipe. The next day I went to go find the locations, so I went for a nice little stroll down the Murray River to try and find a spot to make this drink, and lo and behold we found a great little spot next to this large cut down tree trunk, which became my bar for the day. So for this cocktail, the Fingering Myrtle, I started by infusing the Republic Navy Strength Gin with the dried Aniseed Myrtle, and whilst it was doing its thing, we went for a quick dip in the river. Once the ingredients had some time to melt together, I decanted it back into the small travel bottle, and then started to prep the rest of the ingredients. So I began with honey water, which is what I'll be using for the sweetener. I grabbed a pot of some local honey from my mate's cupboard and did a 50-50 mix of some water to make a 1-to-1 ratio for the honey water. Next, I skinned and chopped up the jujube fruit, ready to be muddled into this cocktail. And if you've ever eaten one of these, remember it does have a small stone in the middle. And finally, preparing the garnish. I'll be using finger limes, which I'll get to later, but also I'll be doing a lime twist. So I'm going to cut one lime in half, as this is what we'll be using for the acid in this drink. And with the other, I'm going to peel off a long strip of zest, clean up the edges, and twist. And that's all the prep done. So now to make this thing. I'm going to first give the glass a spray with some absinthe, which I took with me back from the UK just in case I needed it, and well, I needed it. And it should pair nicely with the licorice notes within the gin infusion. So I'll start with muddling the jujube chunks into the bottom of my shaker, and then grabbing one of the half limes I cut earlier and squeezing 25 milliliters of fresh lime juice. Next is the honey water. I'll be using 20 milliliters for this drink. And yes, I spilt a bit, so the ants will be going wild in a moment. And finally, we'll be using 60 milliliters of our Aniseed Myrtle infused navy strength gin. And now that it's all ready to go, I'm going to add some ice to the tin and give this a hard shake. Now that it's all shook up, I'm going to replace the ice in the glass and then double strain over the top to make sure that there's no ice shards left. And to complete this cocktail, I just need to add the garnish. So I'm going to slice open one of my finger limes and squeeze it over the top. But check out how amazing this looks. And to be honest, I didn't even know they could come in red. But look how beautiful this colour is. Literally looks like caviar, and it contrasts so well with the drink. So I'm just going to pop a bunch of these over the top. And add the lime.
What the hell are you doing, Ethan?
And that's how to Finger Myrtle. I even had a local Aussie pop over and wonder what the fuck I'm doing over here, and I'm glad to say he approved of the name.
It looks delicious.
So all that's left to do is give it a taste. And upon the first sip, you get the sweet herbaceous note straight to the nose from the absinthe, but it doesn't overpower the drink at all. And it blends really well with the subtle licorice notes and faint earthiness of the gin. This is followed by a mild sweetness from the honey and a nice tart and crisp finish from the lime juice and the jujube fruit. And the finger limes added a very interesting texture to the mix, and not something I've really experienced in a cocktail before, as the best way I can describe it is like a mix between popping candy and boba. Every now and then you get this little burst of citrus in your mouth, but I quite liked it. And overall, I think it's a well-rounded cocktail. But if I would change one thing, I would have added some egg white and make this more of a sours, as I think the drink came out a little thin, and it would have been really lovely with a foam on top, which would have also allowed the finger limes to balance on the surface. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the story of me fingering Myrtle, and thank you for joining me on this adventure through Australia. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos coming very soon. And remember that there's no bars in the wild.